everybody, and welcome to GDT Live, presented by the Game Day Types podcast. My name is Dayton Camo, alongside me, Colton Davies, and today we've got a special episode. We've been waiting for this one for a while. Once we found out that it was confirmed, I know we kept it from you guys, but we're here to tell you that TSN's Director of Scouting, Craig Button, is here to join us today. But first off, Colton, how's it going, man?
It's going good. It's going good. Looking forward to talking with Craig about the upcoming draft, and it should be a good episode.
Yeah, there's definitely lots to talk to. Some things that happened today in the NHL. So there's a lot to discuss today. But without further ado, let's welcome Craig in and let's get this thing started.
Craig, how's it going?
It's going really well. I'm in Toronto. It's about 48 degrees with the humidex. So I left Calgary last night, and all we were having was rain, and they had 30 centimeters of snow up in the mountains on overnight Friday and Saturday. So I don't know. I got a taste of winter. I got a taste of spring, and now I got blazing desert heat. So you know what? That's what you get across our country. You never know what type of temperature or what type of climate you're going to get, but it's all good.
That's good. Yeah, definitely the weather has been all over the place. Even here in Kamloops, it's raining like crazy. So I get that. It's been a while, Craig, since you and I have talked. A couple years since we met at the Memorial Cup in 2023. A lot has happened, obviously, since then. I'm very appreciative of you coming on the show today to talk with us. Let's chat a little bit about the NHL Draft and what's upcoming there.
Okay, we can do that.
Do you think that this year's draft class is going to be one that is, how should I word this, all over the place, in the sense that we'll know the first couple picks, and then after that it's kind of just whatever teams decide they want to choose, and we might see some flyers, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I'm not so sure it's any different than any other year. Last year we knew Macklin Celebrini was going to be the first pick, but we didn't know who was going to be the second pick. We didn't know who the third pick was going to be. And I think this year's draft is similar to last year's draft with respect to position. And by that, I mean, last year you had 6 defensemen that I think everybody felt were going in the first 12 picks or 10, 12 picks. And they did. Then you have the next, and then this year's draft is defined by centermen. And I don't think there's any question that there's six of them that are going to go in the first 10, 12 picks. And that's where you get discrepancy and a little bit of, okay, we value that a little bit more than this. The other team values that a little bit more than that. And I think that's where you lack certainty in a draft. But I think there's really good centers, just like there was really good defensemen. Last year's draft, the 6 defensemen that went in the first 12 picks, they were all different. Like it wasn't like they were all the same player and you had, well, we'll take this guy over that guy. They were all different types of defensemen that offer you different things. I think the same exact thing about the centers here. I mean, you have Misa and you have Rondell and you have Hagens and you have Desnoyers and you have Jake O'Brien and you have Roger McQueen. And those are the 6 that I think have kind of separated themselves into that half dozen group of players. So I think Roger McQueen is a wild card. I think Roger McQueen, having played a full season, very well could be in the discussion for first overall. But he got injured, and I have no problem thinking of him as a top player. But I think scouts, as they go through the course of a scouting season, are looking for a little bit more affirmation. So medical reports will come into play, just like it did with Caden Lidstrom last year. But I think that it'll be very interesting to just see how those centers fall off the board, so to speak.
McQueen was a guy that I got to watch this year a lot in the WHL too, until he got injured, of course. But a guy that I could 100% agree with would be top 5, maybe even in that lottery category with top 3. But the injuries derailed him. But he impressed from what I've heard at the combine, and he's interviewed well. And I think he's a player that is worth taking a shot on, despite that, that injury bug that he kind of lingers a little bit with him. My question for you is, do you at all see the Islanders taking James Higgins at first overall, or are they just going to unanimously go with Matthew Schaefer?
Yeah, I don't want to be critical of James, because I think James is a very, very good player, but I don't think he's in the category of player with Misa or with Matthew Schaefer. I just don't think he's in that category of player. I don't think he's in the category of player with Roger McQueen. So when you start, and I'm talking, one's a defenseman and Schaefer, the two other guys are centers. So I know that you hear teams, are we open to trading the first overall pick? Yeah, everybody says, yeah, unless your name's Rick Dudley, no other manager trades the first overall pick, this close to the draft. And certainly I just don't think that when you're looking at what's available to you at number one, I just think there's players that are more impactful, who in my view, their potential is greater than James. And I think James can be a really, really good NHL player, but I don't think he's in that category of player with the three guys I just named. And that's not including Porter Martone, who's a different type of player, or an Anton Frondel. I just don't see him in that class of players. So I guess if you want to take a local kid, you do that. But in my view, you're not getting a player that is the so-called best player at that pick. You can trade back and try to see what you can do to maximize. And I think there's a lot of teams, with a handful of teams that would be interested in getting their hands on that first pick, because Schaefer is a number one dominant defenseman. He can control the game. And I'll go back to the Islanders back in 09. And in 09, they made a choice. Was it 09? Maybe it was 010 or 08. They chose John Tavares over Victor Hedman. Like, John Tavares has been a really good NHL player. He's not in the category of Victor Hedman.
That's fair.
Craig, you said this draft was littered with centermen, and it's almost a centerman's draft. There's lots of them on the board, especially in the top 10. After Misa, who can play the wing or the middle, who do you think is the first centerman off the board here?
Does that include Misa?
After Misa, because I think
after Misa,
have to pencil that too.
Okay, fair enough. I just wanted to be clear on that. And you're right. I think that Michael can play the wing. He's shown a real capability playing the wing, and then he moves back to center ice and he puts up 62 goals and 134 points. Not bad at center either. To me, it's when I look at the two guys, it's Frondel, who reminds me a lot of Barkov in his style of play, or Roger McQueen, who reminds me a lot of Ryan Getzlaf. So to me, they're clear-cut number one defensemen, or centers, excuse me. And they're big, they're thick, they're smart, they're competitive, they're going to put up points, they're going to help your team be better. And I just think that one of those two guys, and I'm partial to Roger McQueen. I don't have to do the medical research on the reports. That's going to be a big thing for the NHL teams, to be satisfied with the medical reports. But if you're satisfied with the medical reports, then I don't think there's any reason to that Roger McQueen would not be in consideration, right after Misa as the next best center. And I love Frondel. I watch what Sasha Barkov did at a similar age, and I think Frondel has a lot of those same types of qualities as a player. And certainly when you think about Sasha Barkov, back-to-back Stanley Cup champion, Selke Trophy winner, control the game, and be a model of excellence for your franchise, I think Anton can be a lot like that. And Ryan Getzlaf, I mean, he went 19th to the Anaheim Ducks back in 03. And certainly I think he'll be a Hall of Fame player. I don't know if it'll be this year, because there's a pretty good group of first-year eligible players. But I think Ryan showed very clearly he was a dominant number one center.
Now, with Frondel playing in the Allsvenskan against men all year long, do you think that would kind of give him an advantage, maybe as if the scouts are looking at it as so he played against men all season, he'd be a great fit to just jump in immediately?
Yeah, I don't think there's any player ready to play in the NHL. And I know they all talk about being ready to play in the NHL, and that's what they want to do, and they should go to camp and try to put their best foot forward. I don't expect anything less from any of the players. but I honestly don't think there's any player ready for the NHL. Does that mean that somebody might not be in the NHL? I think that growth is really important for young players. Yes, Barry Kotkaniemi was the 3rd overall pick by the Montreal Canadiens. I think they failed him. I think they failed him by keeping him at 18. He was never able to develop his game from an offensive point of view. I think Curtis Lazar got failed by the Ottawa Senators. You know, Curtis Lazar was a top goal scorer. He was a top player on a Memorial Cup winning team. He ended up being the captain of Team Canada, the 2015 World Junior. And then he's not good enough to play in the NHL, so they're putting him in 3rd line, 4th line, you know, and then he finds that way. Then they send him down to the minors when he's 21 and go, oh, we got to go find your offensive game. He lost his offensive game. He lost his confidence. These players, for the most part, I want to get them ready to contribute to their potential. And I think that Anton Frundell, despite playing against players in the Allsvenskan, against older players and performing very, very well, it's not about did you perform. It's about where can you get your game to the highest level and what is the path to do that. And I don't think Anton Frundell playing in the Allsvenskan this year or coming to the NHL would be the right move for him. I think every single player in this draft should be back playing at their junior level, their college level, the European level, wherever that may be.
You have Brady Martin at number 6. We have seen a lot of people have him at number 4. There's a lot of talk about Brady Martin. Do you buy into this talk about Brady Martin? And do you see him being a player that is worth a 4th overall pick if Utah were to decide to go down that route, as people online are claiming it might happen?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, teams are going to evaluate where they're at. I think Porter Martone and Brady Martin have a lot of the same similar type of attributes in their game. They're skilled, they're edgy, they're physical. They're no fun to play against. So do I buy into Brady Martin? Yeah. If I want to win, I want Brady Martin on my team. I want Porter Martone on my team. Those are guys that in every regard help you win. So I don't know so much if it's about buying in. I love the way Brady Martin plays the game. He plays the game with an edge. He plays the game with skill. And ask anybody that plays against Brady Martin. It's no day at the beach. And same with Porter Martone. And I think that when you look at the Stanley Cup playoffs, we know that the Stanley Cup playoffs are different than the NHL regular season. And if you don't recognize that in terms of the types of players you're trying to acquire, you're never going to have success in the Stanley Cup playoffs because it's required. And those types of players like Brady Martin are ones that help you win.
Now, touching on Brady Martin for just a second, Colton is not very he doesn't like this take that I'm about to put out there, but I know that there are a couple of teams, one especially being the Montreal Canadiens, who have a very active general manager, 2 picks in the 1st round. Do you see anybody trying to move that pick and get that 4th overall pick from Utah, or do you think they're set on picking 4th?
No, I think teams are going to listen. I mean, keep in mind, Utah, much like the Islanders, moved up significantly after the draft lottery. So they've moved themselves into a position to get a different level of player. That doesn't mean, let's just use Utah as an example, that if you decided that you could get 2 players at 16 and 17, where the Montreal Canadiens are picking, the one pick is Calgary's, the other one is their own. You could start to look at, okay, what does it look like as opposed to one player at 4. Bill Armstrong is going to be open-minded to it. Managers should be open-minded to it. But rarely, and you can go back in time, rarely do you see a team picking in the top 5 move into the bottom half of the 1st round to make a pick. Rarely does that happen. And so would I be surprised if it happened? Yes, I would be. And I think that it's not without merit to consider it, but you spend a lot of time as an NHL organization scouting, formulating your list, and you really get to feel, oh, God, this guy can really help us. This guy can really, really be a difference maker for us. So I think you're weighing it out between one player that could be a significant difference maker that's at different level as opposed to 2. Here's one of the benefits for the Utah Mammoth is that before the lottery, they had to spend their time on players that were going to be picked at around that 16, 17 mark. So they're going to be pretty familiar with a group of players that they were already comfortable with when they consider something like this. So again, would I be surprised? Yes. Do I think it's without merit? No. And I'm not so sure that it becomes a case of trading out of that 4th spot for a player that you're going to draft as maybe opposed to a player that can come right into your lineup and help you right now.
Do you at all think there's a player outside of the top 10 that could push themselves into this top 10 conversation, like kind of how we saw with Beckett Seneca last year?
Yeah, it didn't surprise me. I'll tell you why it didn't surprise me with Beckett. I prefaced earlier about the 6th defenseman. We knew Celebrini was going 1. Okay, there was no question Celebrini was going 1. I just talked about the next 6 defensemen. Okay, so you have 6 defense. So that's 7 players now. So you look at the Anaheim Ducks and they're going, we're not taking a defenseman. So who are they considering at that point? Seneca, TJ Ginla. There was a very small group of players. I know people go, oh my God, Beckett Seneca, he went 3. But when you start to narrow down to where the Anaheim Ducks found themselves, we're not taking a defenseman, we're not getting Celebrini. So what do we do here? I guess they could have considered Caden Lidstrom, and I'm sure they did. But it was a very small group of players. There was Seneca, Demidov, Lidstrom, and Iginla. And I think that was the 4 players that they had to make a choice on. I don't think this was one of these wild card selections that came out of nowhere. I think that Beckett was somebody that was certainly a player that was considered in the top 10, top 12. And now Anaheim became the team that said, hey, we know we're eliminating 7 players. What's our next group? And they took Beckett Seneca. Now I'm going to answer your question. And I think there's any number of, I shouldn't say any number of players. I think there's a few players that fit the description of what you just described that could end up, going into that top 10. And I don't know if it's a surprise. I mean, you're saying outside the top 10. I mean, could Jackson Smith, could Kayshawn Aitchison, 2 defensemen, great skating defensemen. Jackson is a really rangy, big player that reminds me a lot of Noah Hannafin. And then you have Kayshawn Aitchison, who's just such a hard player. Reminds me a lot of Caden Gooley. And so when you start to look at those types of comparable players, and you're looking for like defenseman that can make that kind of an impact on your team, those are 2 players that it wouldn't surprise me to see them pop into the top 10. And again, much like the Anaheim Ducks last year, if you're not looking for a center, and I don't think the Ducks are looking for a center, I should say the Ducks, but a team in the top 10, like the Ducks were not looking for a defenseman, a team not looking for a center could be saying, hey, we want one of these defensemen, because I think they're both 2 defensemen that are going to be really good, strong NHL players.
I actually really like that, Craig. We did a video last night on the side, our top 10 projections for the NHL draft, and I had Jackson Smith going to the Anaheim Ducks, but Colton and the other guys weren't too keen on it. I think if he went to the Ducks, they lost Drysdale. He could fit in, and he could almost play on the left side a second pair role in a couple of years if his offense kind of takes a jump at Penn State.
Well, Dayton, I think you're smart. I don't know why those other guys would be disputing your intelligence in this regard. Jackson he's a great skater. I said Noah Hannafin. They have a really good blue line there, and keep in mind, and I'm going to go back to to a draft in 2013. And the Anaheim Ducks drafted Shea Theodore, and Shea Theodore is a Team Canada player. He's an Olympian. He's a top defenseman in the National Hockey League. And I think Jackson, I might say Noah Hannafin, but I could easily, to your point, if finding some of that offense and continue to build on the offense that he had this year in Tri-City, I think that he could be like Shea Theodore. So you're always trying to round out your team with different types of players. And I think that the Anaheim Ducks are no different than any other type of team. I think that Jackson Smith could absolutely fit the bill in that regard. And because he's a great skater, he just is. He's simply a great skater. And now you look at the other parts of his game and you say, hey, we can develop that. I think there's another factor that goes into this too. Joe Quenneville has had excellent defenseman. He helps defensemen understand what their game is and how to use it to maximum effect in the NHL. So that becomes a factor too for the Anaheim Ducks potentially drafting a defenseman at number 10.
You have Jack Ivankovic ranked at 12, and Ravensburger, I believe, was at 28 or 29. What do you see in the differences between those two, and how come Ivankovic is ahead for you?
Well, so I just want to be clear here, Colton, that like I'm projecting. Like Jack Ivankovic's not going to be a first round draft pick. I'll be shocked if he's drafted in the first 32. But I'm trying to project 4 or 5 years down the road and try to say where he's at. And as I mean, I've watched Jack for a long time now, and you start to watch his excellence, and you watch his dominance, and there's only one thing he lacks, and that's height. And when I start comparing a player to Dustin Wolf, and I watched what Dustin Wolf did, he was the best goaltender in his league for 5 consecutive seasons. 2 with Everett, 3 with the Calgary Wranglers. Oh yeah, and then he comes into the NHL as a number 1 goaltender this year, and he's on the all-rookie team, unanimous, no question. But amongst like the top 10, 12 goaltenders in the entire National Hockey League, not just a rookie. And I'm thinking to myself, well, Craig, you keep talking, comparing him to Dustin Wolf. Well, if you're gonna do that, don't you have to have him rated higher? And I do. His dad Frank was a goaltender. His dad Frank was drafted by the Pittsburgh Penguins. His dad Frank was 5'11" at the same age as Jack. So I'm not saying that Jack has to grow, but outside of not having that height, I think Jack Ivankovic's like an outstanding goaltender. The IQ, the technical ability, the quickness, the athleticism, everything that I think you need to be a top goaltender. And I think he has all that. And if he ends up growing like his dad did, there's no telling how good he can be. Joshua Ravensburger is a really good goaltender. And I think that Joshua's a little bit more unrefined, shall we say. When I go back in the draft, and Sebastian Cossa was a first-round draft pick to the Detroit Red Wings. Fantastic set of attributes, but the technical part of his game had to be worked on. Like I say this about goaltending, just like I said, pitchers have to learn how to pitch. Goaltenders have to learn how to goaltend. You can't just strap on the pads and put on a blocker and a catching glove and going. The position's very technical. The position requires understanding your angles and everything, how teams are trying to break you down. And I think that for Joshua, I think it's a little bit of a longer path for Joshua. Not that it won't be for Jack, but I think that Jack just has a little bit more refinement in his game at this point in time. And we'll see if a goaltender gets drafted in the first round. But I think both those goaltenders have the capability to be number 1 goaltenders in the NHL. I have Jack, just like I do have Jack ahead of Joshua. And simply put, I think he's got a little bit higher potential.
Yeah, and I could see a team with 2 first-round picks in the latter half taking a chance on one of these goaltenders for sure, just to have one of them in the pipeline, right? There's a player I've been wanting to ask you about. He plays for the Kamloops Blazers, Nathan Bain. What do you make of Nathan Bain, and where do you kind of see his potential?
Well, what I see, I mean, you're talking about a very highly skilled player. I know, Colton, that'll come as music to your ears because you watch him with your eyes, and he's very gifted. He's very talented. I think like a lot of young players, and Nathan, I don't think is any different. It's about finding. Let me rewind just for a quick second. To be a regular NHL player, there's 3 things you need to be able to do. You need to be consistent, dependable, and reliable, and that's part of maturing. That's players, because that's what coaches want to see from you when you're in the end, because they need to have the confidence that when you're out on the ice, you're going to do those things. I think that Nathan, when I watched him for a few years, he has all those high-end skill attributes. He's got to work on, I think, just that part of the game where, hey, listen, it becomes hard, but offer some other things to the game outside of your skill. And that's part of learning. That's part of development. I think if Nathan had shown that by this point in time, we're talking about a definitive first-round draft pick. You just mentioned teams with a couple of picks, teams early in the second round. I think with that skill level, the size, I think that Nathan Bem is a player that has attracted a lot of attention of NHL teams, and he should, because that package of skills that he has, the size that he has, and he plays the game with a little bit of ease. I think sometimes players like Nathan, they end up going to NHL camps, and that's when their eyes really get opened. It's like, whoa, oh, that's how fast you got to play. Oh, that's how strong they are. Oh, that's how hard they are. That's how tenacious they are. I don't think he's somebody that lacks any of the attributes. I think he's just in that state. We could very well be talking about a player in a few years' time. You go, how did they get him there? Corey Perry was the 28th pick in the 2003 draft. We know what Corey Perry. I mean, we're talking about Hall of Fame credentials, and I think that teams go back. Oh, what about his skating? What about this? What about that? And that's why a player goes a little bit later in the draft. But I think Nathan could definitely be one of those players that could end up, making teams question themselves. Why did we have him not higher? Why did we not push him a little? Why did we not select him? I think that comes into play there.
That's a good answer.
Well, Craig, we had a question come in from the chat from Willie Stiles. He wants to know if there's a player out there that could be a really smart pick or a sneaky pick, someone that we might have not heard of before.
Wow. I mean, you guys are dialed in. How am I going to mention a name that you haven't heard of? That's, and that's one of the great things now about, the prospect evaluations. So many people are involved in it. People are working hard at it. And I really think that it's something that, really, really keeps people on their toes, keeps me on my toes. You go, why do they have them that high? Why do they have him that low? And it makes you go through and ask yourself some of those questions. So I don't know if I want to stay in the first round. I don't know if I want to go to the second round. But what I would say is, and before I get to a couple of names, one of the players that I think has got like tremendous upside. I just love the way he plays. Is Cole Reshny with the now North Dakota hockey program, leaving Victoria along with Keaton Vierhoff. And watching him over the course of the last 2 years, he was an excellent 16-year-old. This year, playing against Spokane in the Western Hockey League playoffs, I mean, he was matched up against Berkeley Catton, and he was right there with Berkeley Catton. Berkeley was the 8th overall pick. We know what a tremendous player Berkeley is. So when you start to get into those types of players, and you get into and you start to evaluate, where guys like him can get to, and guys I just see so much tremendous growth with him. Now, a couple of guys that I would just quickly go to. I know that Alexander Zarovsky is a Russian that maybe doesn't have a lot of notoriety right now, but this guy's gifted. This guy's skilled. Wouldn't surprise me one bit to see him go in the first round. In fact, I'm doing a mock draft for TSN on Wednesday, and I do have him going in the first round. I think that he's a player that I think could really, really push along here. And the Russians this year, I mean, we've seen Russians in the last few years. We knew about them. The scouts know about Zarovsky. It just doesn't feel as high end right at this point in time. And that's going to happen. You're going to get to situations like that. You're going to have players. If I go to the second round now and I start to, like, Jack Nesbitt is a player that I'm not conflicted on him. I can see why teams are really high on him. And at the same time, I have him just outside the first round. I see him more like an Adam Lowry type. And I think Adam Lowry is a terrific, terrific player for the Winnipeg Jets. But if you see a lot more offense in Jack Nesbitt at the NHL level, I think that's what allows teams to step up and go, okay, this is a guy that we want to draft. This is a guy that we think could be a really good player down the line. I'm going to mention a player that's out of U.S. high school, Mason West. And he's a quarterback. He's committed to Michigan State, not next year, but the year after. And when I watch a 6'5" or 6'4.5", whatever he is, center that can play, and I think he's raw. I think that he's so raw. Having played high school hockey in Minnesota, I just think that there's a lot of potential there. I see more offense, from some of those players that, like I said, Jack Nesbitt is raw, Mason West is raw, but I see a lot of upside in your game. We talked about Nathan earlier. Like Nathan's got a lot more refinement in his skill area. I think it's different areas he's got to work on. But those would be the guys. I mean, you asked me about Nathan, Mason West, certainly Jack Nesbitt, and I just think Cole Reshny is going to be a player that's going to help teams win. I just see somebody that is so gifted in his hockey sense and his competitiveness, and I think his skill is very, very good.
We've got another question coming in here from the chat, Craig. This one from Randy. He wants to know about a Swedish Hockey League player, Milton Gastrin. Have you seen any of Gastrin this season, and what can you tell me about him?
I've seen Gastrin lots. I've seen Gastrin lots over the last few years, and I think Milton is a prototypical 2/3 center in the National Hockey League. I don't think he's going to be a huge offensive guy, and when I say not a huge, I think he could be like Anton Lundell. So if that gives you an idea of a comparable type of player. And Anton could be a second line center on a lot of teams in the NHL, but he's a great third line center in Florida. And I see Milton as a lot of similar in that regard. Plays hard, plays heavy, good in timely moments, like makes life hard on opponents, makes others around him better. Paul Maurice has said it. He talks about his third line as being a line that other teams have a really tough time matching up against. And I think when you're trying to build out your team and you're trying to build depth, I think Milton Gastrin does exactly that. We look at the top end of the draft and we see a lot of skill, and we don't want to talk about skill. But the fact of the matter is there'll be approximately 45 players from this draft that'll play 350 games or more in the NHL. That's the numbers. Approximately 45. That's it. So if you can get a player in the second half of the first round, picking in the 20s, and then probably where Milton ends up, maybe in the early 30s, and he can become a regular third-line player for you and play that many games and fill out your roster, like you got a good player. Nick Foligno was a first-round draft pick. Nick Foligno was essentially, a 2/3, depending where he was at. Go look at Nick Foligno's record in terms of, you find a player like that after the first half of the first round, I think you're doing really well, and I think that Milton offers those types of qualities and attributes.
You touched on Cole Reshny and Keaton Verhoff, so I wanted to let's dive a little bit more into the NCAA and CHL stuff. What is your what was your initial reaction to the decision as a collective to allow CHL players to now freely go to the NCAA and vice versa?
Yeah, I think that most of all, I like the fact that there's more doors open for players. We're going to talk about the Keaton Verhoff. Well, I shouldn't say the. We're going to talk about Keaton Verhoff and Cole Reshny, and we're going to talk about Malcolm Spence and others. Jackson Smith is committed to Penn State. So we're going to talk about those players, but that's a very small group of players, and they're good. And the NCAA has always been after top players, and it's no different than the CHL being after top players. But I like the fact that you can now go and play NCAA hockey after having played in the CHL. I think it's really positive for the players. There's going to be players that are going to have really good CHL careers and might not be good enough for the NHL, or they might need a little bit more time. And so the NCAA gives that. Part of the CBA that says you have to sign a CHL drafted player after 2 years, I think that works against a lot of CHL players. I was talking to Landon Ferraro, Ray Ferraro's son, who was a second-round draft pick to the Detroit Red Wings years ago. And, we were talking exactly about this. And, I think about Landon. He came into the WHL at 16. He went to a Red Deer team that wasn't really good. He had his, I wouldn't say struggles. What he had was normal. He wasn't ready to dominate. But now all of a sudden you find your game, and now you're building your game, and now you're thrust into the American Hockey League. And I think that, and Landon said this, he goes, he thinks himself, and I agree with him, that a year at the NCAA after being 20 this would have been really good for him. And I think that, for NHL teams, we're not sure how it's all going to play out. There's still some uncertainty. I'm going to ask you guys, I'm not going to ask you, I'm going to tell you this. There was 1,670 players that played in the NCAA this year on roster players. There was 33 18-year-olds. 33 18-year-olds that played in the NCAA this past year. 33. There's 60 teams. What's going to happen is a lot of these players are going to realize how hard it is to play in the NCAA. Like Keaton Verhoff, who was excellent for Victoria. I think that's a big step for him to go to the NCAA. I believe that players, like when you hit that age of 19, a Jackson Smith's going to be drafted in the first round. Cole Reschke is going to be drafted in the first round. You've built up a lot of what I call like elements to your on and off ice game, leadership, confidence, and you do that. Now at 19, you might feel that like, hey, I need a different challenge. You're not ready for the NHL. You can't go to the American Hockey League. I just feel in my own mind that might be the best age to go if you're a Cole Reschke or you're a Jackson Smith. I understand that there's an allure there financially, but at the same time, the allure financially is to get yourself as ready as possible for the NHL, because the monies you're going to get from being a really good NHL player are going to far outweigh the short-term compensation from the NCAA, because there's a formula that goes into it, and it's not like football or basketball. So that's my own take on it. That's my own, and having watched it for the special players, like Macklin Celebrini won the Hobey Baker as a 17-year-old. There was no question he was going to go in there. But I think college hockey, and you got to be a student athlete. And I think that you get through high school, you're 19 years old, you got a little bit more maturity, you fit in a little bit differently. And I think for a lot of players, giving yourself that time to just continue to grow it and grow your leadership, grow your confidence. All those players now are going into a new environment, a new situation. They're not going to be leaders right off the bat. They can't be leaders. And I think that that's something that gets missed with respect to them making this decision at this point in time. So now you ask yourself, well, when's your next opportunity going to be to become a leader? And, that's part of development too.
Yeah. And one player that I have I've liked to go that NCAA route was Shea Van Olm, who played for the Blazers and then went down to Spokane, had a wonderful year with Spokane this year. He's a guy that I think really benefits from going down to Penn State for a year and having that development for a year. But I agree that it's a lot about like the 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds, the ones that can, get drafted. And then if they don't need to go back because they've already done so much, then they can move on to their development in the NCAA and so forth. Do you at all think, though, that the CHL might try to entice players with payments as well in the future?
Yeah, I think that's a very different scenario for the CHL teams, and I'm gonna put this into the macro umbrella here. The NCAA, when you're talking about big academic schools like Michigan and Boston College, and North Dakota and Michigan State and Minnesota and Wisconsin, and Denver, and I mean there's so many of them. Western Michigan, I mean Bowling Green. I mean you have now somebody that's Dennis Williams, who was in Everett and knows the Western Hockey. I mean, he recruited a lot of Western Hockey League players to go to Bowling Green. I mean, you have resources. You have resources to be able to go and say, hey, and you have boosters, you have alumni to say we can go and how do you do that in the CHL? Like, it's a fair question. I think it's a question that should be asked. I think it's a question that is being asked, but I think it's a very difficult situation that CHL teams find themselves when it comes to compensating players, because what you're going to have, and I go back in time to prior to the 04-05 lockout, you had your massive haves in the NHL and you had your massive have-nots, and it was an inequitable playing field and an uneven playing field, and I think that's the same risk you run playing like in junior hockey with the CHL. There's no question that certain teams are going to be able to have a little bit more ease of opportunity to do it rather than others. So I think that from an overall level, it becomes a little bit more difficult for a lot of CHL teams to be able to do that. And certainly, I think that the NHL is going to be learning, the NCAA is going to be learning, the CHL is going to be learning through all of this. And I think you have to. What I try to remind players, and it's no different than when I reminded them when they were 15 or 14 years of age. And I think that you don't have to ask players at 14 or 15 now to think about college hockey. I had a college coach say to me a few years ago, he goes, I'm going into living rooms with 14-year-old kids, and I'm trying to convince them that college hockey and being a student athlete is something that would be really good for them when they're 18. He goes, they don't even know what they're going to do tomorrow, let alone in 4 years' time. And so I think that takes the pressure away from the kids. They can go and try the CHL. They can see where it's at. That it's a logical next step, and then they can test themselves and see where it's at. But I think when you look at, there's a lot of things that go into being a student athlete, and a big part of it is being a student. And you got to remain academically eligible. Players that go in the first year into the NCAA. I mean, that first semester is hard. Like the presidents are under fire to get kids graduated and keep them academically eligible. So they have study halls. So players have to ask themselves, is this something that I want to do? Do I only want to play 30, 35 games? I know that there's physical components that can help you by playing college hockey in less games, but there's other things that go along with it. And I think that's the learning curve that everybody is going to be in. Don't be surprised one bit. Don't be, and it's going to come as soon as this year, where you see a number of players eligible to still play in the CHL that are going to come back and play in the CHL because a few things. They're not ready for the NCAA hockey. They see that the demands are a little bit greater than maybe they're ready for right at this age. That doesn't mean they can't be. It just means they're not going to be, embracing it to the extent that they need to embrace it. So don't be surprised when we see players that have committed to come back to the CHL. I don't think there'll be any question that will happen.
Well, Craig, since we're touching on CHL to NCAA, this is one that I've kind of been thinking about for a while since it happened. Caleb Desnoyers was named the captain of the Moncton Wildcats right as soon as they got home and they had their celebration after the Memorial Cup. Do you think that was Moncton's way of saying, hey, don't go to the NCAA if you're offered? Stay here. You'll be our captain.
I don't think so. Caleb's a leader. Caleb might not have been the captain this year, but he was no less a leader. I think one of the great things about Caleb, and there's many great things about him, is that he respects the experience of older players. Caleb went in there at 16. It was unbelievable to watch him be a leader. You don't have to be the captain to be a leader. Mark Messier showed that in Edmonton when Wayne Gretzky was the captain, and he, never was he. I mean, second fiddle to Wayne Gretzky. Everybody was second fiddle to Wayne Gretzky. But I think that it was just natural progression. Gardner McDougall is a heck of a coach, and I just think that with the team graduating, Marcus Vidicek was their captain, and I think with him graduating and leaving, Marcus is going to go play in the NCAA. I mean, I think that's a really good step for Marcus, but I think it's a natural progression that Caleb was going to be the captain because there's certain people and certain players that they're magnets. They're magnets. They attract everybody to them. They're leaders. Matthew Schaefer is like that, but I don't think it's to keep Caleb. I think that Moncton's it's so well run. It's such a great organization, and I think that Caleb being named the captain was just simply it's his time to wear the C.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
How was the Memorial Cup this year? We had Austin Elliott on. We got to talk to him about what it was like winning for London and beating his former league, the WHL, and he was an awesome guest. What was it like from your perspective?
Well, let me give you a little bit of background. Rimouski is a great hockey community. I mean, Colton, you're there in Kamloops. You know what a great hockey community Kamloops is. And you go back in time and you think back to the 80s and you think back to all the players that came through there. You think about the success of the early 90s. And I mean, Hall of Fame players that came through their Memorial Cups. Well, Rimouski, who only came into existence in 95, I mean, go look. I mean, they ended up getting Vincent Lecavalier. I mean, he became the first overall pick. Brad Richards leads them to a Memorial Cup, and then shortly thereafter, they're able to draft Sidney Crosby, who leads them not to a Memorial Cup, but to a Memorial Cup tournament. Lafreniere. It's a community of about 50,000 people that loves hockey, and the players give back to Rimouski, and Rimouski gives to the players. It's just simply a great environment. When you talk about hockey and you talk about the passion for hockey, you feel it at every turn. The tournament, there was not a seat. Like, there's no seat that's unsold. There was not a seat that wasn't sat in during the entire tournament. It was unbelievable when you say, like, it wasn't just when Rimouski was playing or Moncton was playing. The other teams playing, the seats were filled, and the passion and everything that they had for it was phenomenal. And when you think about the Memorial Cup, and every Memorial Cup is different because there's only a short window for teams and players to be able to compete for a Memorial Cup. And, 3 of the teams won a championship, and yet they're trying to put the cherry on top. And, in the case of Moncton, in the case of the Medicine Hat Tigers, there's a little bit of disappointment that you didn't win the Memorial Cup. But, you win 16 games to win a league championship. It's pretty impressive. And I can't say enough about Austin Elliott. I'll be honest with you, and I did say to my friends at the CHL, I'm shocked that Austin Elliott wasn't the CHL goaltender of the year. All he did was lose 3 games. He lost 1 in the regular season, 1 in the playoffs, and 1 in the Memorial Cup. His numbers were simply better than anybody else. I have no idea. I want a recount on that. And I'm not taking it. Jackson Parsons had a great year in Kitchener. Like, Austin Elliott was lights out. Like, tell me the last time a goaltender in the CHL had a year like Austin Elliott. Not happening. Yeah. And certainly I know Colin Priestner really, and Austin Elliott was a good goaltender for the Saskatoon Blades.
Oh, yeah.
They ended up bringing in Evan Gardner. I guess one of the things and Colin was trying to, he wasn't asking. He wanted to get Austin into a really good place. And we know he cleared waivers and ends up in Ontario. I mean, you think about some of the teams in the Western Hockey League that were pretty good. Could have Austin Elliott been the guy that turned it in? And I'm not talking about Harrison Menigan, who was great for the Medicine Hat Tigers. I'm talking about other teams that might have been able to find a way with an Austin Elliott in the net.
Yeah, and it was funny. We talked to Austin a little bit about what it was like to clear waivers, and he even said he was a bit shocked not a single other WHL team kind of picked him up. But hey, he goes on and becomes a Memorial Cup champion. Gets the last laugh at the end.
Becomes a London Knights legend. Like Colin Priestner, who I think does a great job in Saskatoon. I mean, he was saying, hey, listen, this guy can help you. And like I said, he'd had a record of accomplishment in the Western Hockey League. So again, there's not a manager alive in any league that doesn't say, oh, geez, I regret that. I think there's some managers in the Western Hockey League that regret not getting Austin Elliott. I know who doesn't regret not getting him, and that's Mark Hunter in London.
Well,
exactly.
Craig, here's a kicker for you. We were talking about Rimouski. You graduated from Riverside High School in Pierrefonds, and then graduated from Riverdale. Okay. Riverdale, and then graduated from Concordia. How's your French? Were you able to use it in Rimouski?
My French needs to be honed up. I mean, when I was younger, my French was really good. I've been outside of the province now for 40 years, just about. And my goal is by January 1st is to be functioning again in French. You end up in Rimouski, and I understand, and but it's taking that steel brush and getting the rust off in your head, because you just got to flow with it. And I'm working at it every day. My wife is fluent in French. She works with the Canadian Olympic Committee, so I have somebody that I can converse with and work through it. But that's my goal. By January 1st, 2026, I want to be functioning again in French, because there's no reason why I shouldn't be, functioning in French. It's there. It just needs a little scrubbing off and some work, and then it does. But, I was comfortable in Rimouski. I did. And I surprise myself at times, because people that don't speak French and everything, and then they need a little bit of help, and I can be there to help. And I go, oh, okay, like, Craig, come on, give yourself a little more credit and do it. But, I want to be able to be straightforward with you. I want to be able to go on French radio or French TV and converse very comfortably.
So what you're saying is Craig Button on RDS coming soon.
Well, I don't know about that. They got some pretty good people. We were lucky. We were lucky to have Mark Denis on our broadcast at the Memorial Cup, and he does fantastic work with RDS. Him and Pierre Hood are two of the best broadcasters on the planet, not just in Canada. But if you don't speak French or don't understand French, you don't get the benefit of getting their brilliance. But they're simply brilliant, and to be able to work with Mark, who I've known for a lot of years, and who's just so fabulous. I'm not going to unseat Mark Denis, trust me. And I'm not going to unseat Denny Gauthier, and I'm not going to unseat, their roster of Hall of Famers and stars that they have on RDS. I just want to be able to go in and have a good conversation with anybody in French.
Yeah, I mean, that's more what I meant. I meant Craig Button.
I know.
I'm
just giving my props to RDS. I'm just giving my props to RDS.
You have to. Well, Craig, we thank you. It's been 50 minutes. We've had you today for a great episode. And I just want to thank you myself for coming on. Colton, I know, definitely was very pleased to have you on as well. And for everyone else, it's been a great episode. So thank you.
No more questions? You don't have one question on the cutting room floor that you were just dying to ask that? Oh, I think Colton has one.
Well, okay. From your time as a director of scouting and what you did with Dallas and so forth, what has been the biggest change in the scouting world? So many leagues, players are so different, obviously too. But is there other differences?
I think the change. I think the biggest change, Colton, is in the players. When you go back to scouting and you start like in the 80s, the 90s through the 2000s, you have players that they were such an unfinished product. They were so much of what you were doing was trying to project not just how they would play in the NHL, but how they would develop physically. The players now, they have so many great resources from the time they're 13, 14, 15 years of age. And, you heard it for years. Oh, yeah, well, they get to the NHL and they're around pros and they learn how to be a pro. They learn how to be a pro at 14 years of age now. And they're so good. They're so dedicated. And they have those resources they have to get better, whether it be in the physical area, the skill area, the nutrition area, the mental health area, the psychology area. It's all there for them. And so what I see now is a player that is so committed and so dedicated and so much more ready to come into the NHL. And that being said, I still think most of them are going to be 21, 22 before they kind of get a real good firm grip in the NHL. That doesn't mean they don't play at 20 or 20, but what I call real firm footing on the ground. But to watch the players now, I mean, we used to sit down and go, well, how much bigger do you think you can get? The science that goes into evaluation now, the technology, the use of video. I mean, you used to sit there and you go, okay, well, what did you see? Okay, what did we see? I know everybody used video at their point, but not to the extent now where you can go to a game, watch a game, and then you can go back and watch that game and you can watch it together and you can pull it up. And let's say the three of us are, you watched a player and we watched them different places and we can pull them up. Okay, Colton, what did you see here? Okay. Oh yeah, that's a good point, Colton. I didn't see that in the game I saw. Dave, same thing with you. I think that ability to work together through technology helps you be. There's two things that helps you do. It helps you be more thorough, which helps you be more confident when you're selecting the players. And that being said, it's the hardest thing to do because you're looking at young players that are 17 and 18 years of age, and you never get to test them against the players in the level that they're ultimately going to come and play against. And I'll give you an example. You want to be a lawyer, you go to law school, and you're identified as a good student. Then you go and then you go an article and enter, and the law firm says, okay, let's give him this file. Let's see how he handles this file. Let's see how she handles this file. And you go through the files and they go, we're going to hire that person. You never get to go and evaluate a defenseman against Connor McDavid. And that's that's what you're trying to do. So you're drafting the players that are the best players below the level of the NHL. It's a hard job, but I think that the ability to be more thorough, more complete, and it helps your confidence. I think that those are the things that I see have really changed. Players, number one, and what's available to them, which also becomes available to the scouts.
Are you going to LA for the draft?
I am not. Listen. I think the draft is great. I don't like the decentralized draft. I hope it's a one and done, because I think it's terrible.
Yeah.
I think the NHL has something unique. I think it's always been something that's unique. And I think it was a bad decision by the managers to go to this decentralized idea. And so, you're going to go there. It'll be, it just won't be the same. And I'm not against change or anything. I just think the NHL had something unique. All the teams on the floor coming on, and they'll put on a jersey. It just won't be the same. And I hope that in the 2026 draft that it goes back to everybody under the same arena roof, and let's get after it and let's get some excitement in the building.
I agree with that. I definitely loses its luster with stuff like that, with decentralizing it. I grew up watching the draft for I'm 29 now, so 25 years of watching the NHL draft, and it's always been the same. And I thought that's what's been so cool about the NHL. So for them to take that away from everybody, I think it's going to be a big regret, and we'll probably see it revert back a lot sooner than people think.
I hope so, Colton. I think you nailed it. Lost its luster. When you go to the draft, and even if you're not sure who's going first, but who's going fourth, and the cameras are panning, and people are talking about who could go here, and you see the players with their families, and they're nervous, Is this the time? And then you see that moment of elation. Sitting in a green room, sitting around a table, or however they're going to set it up. Sorry, it's manufactured and it ain't real.
Yeah, agreed. Well, thank you very much again, Craig, for coming on. We really appreciate this. It was a blast to talk to you and get your insight on everything. We'll have to have you back on at some point throughout the off season. Everybody go check out Craig Button's work. Everybody knows who you are by now, so I would imagine so. But again, thank you so much for taking an hour out of your day, Craig, to join us.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, first and foremost.
I've got one more for you.
Okay, good. Yeah, okay, then I'll finish with my thank yous. Go ahead, one more.
Okay, Craig, the World Juniors were here in Halifax in 2023. They were, to me, probably the best tournament since the 2009 Ottawa tournament. Do you think, or have you heard of any rumblings of the World Juniors returning to the East Coast anytime soon?
I haven't, and again, we know that Canada is going to host the World Junior Tournament in alternate years for a number of years to come. I just love the fact that when the World Junior can be in communities like it was in Halifax and Moncton, it was phenomenal. It really is phenomenal. I mean, Ottawa last year was good, and the Canadian hockey fan gets behind it, but when we talk about the roots of hockey and we talk about junior hockey, and people can get mad at me, right? Like, junior hockey isn't Calgary and Edmonton and Toronto and Montreal. So I don't think it should, or Vancouver. I don't think it should be in those cities. I really don't. I get it. Okay, there's ways to maximize your revenues and get more people in the building, and people say they want to go and do it. I get it. But I don't think that's the roots of junior hockey. And so for that reason, I want to see it in Saskatoon, and Winnipeg, Ottawa are fine. I'm fine with Winnipeg and Ottawa. I have no problem with Winnipeg and Ottawa. I want to see it in Saskatoon. I want to see it in Halifax. I think Moncton's great. I want to see it in London. I want to see it in places that can really dive in and where and how you maximize it now. I mean, I talk about technology, right? How do we maximize it now with streaming and TV and different things with that, and still make it central to the roots of hockey. And that's where I'm at with it. And that's where I would like. I was in Halifax in 2003. I was in Halifax in 2023. Fantastic. It's the whole atmosphere. It's not just, the thing. You go to Ottawa, and I'm not going to knock Ottawa, but the arenas out in Canada, there's no mingling. There's no real sense of oh, this is What Moncton was great. I mean, you're there, you're going to the game, you're walking around, everybody's there. They have the outdoor rinks. Halifax is the same way. And I'd just like to see more of that. That doesn't mean we can't have it in the big rinks now and again, but I don't think we should ever forget about the smaller junior centers where I said the roots of junior hockey are and where these players come from. Let's keep that in mind too.
I couldn't agree more.
So anyway, thank you guys for having me. Always a pleasure for me to join you guys. And if the opportunity, if you feel there's an opportunity for me to come and join you again, happy to do so.
We will for sure, Craig. Thank you again, and take care.
Thanks.
Take care, Craig.
You're muted.
I'm not muted, but that's all right. Colton, another great episode today. How'd you think that one went?
Fantastic. Couldn't thank Craig enough for joining us. Fantastic guest. We got exactly what we wanted out of that hour, and you guys seem to love him. So we'll bring Craig back on throughout the offseason sometime, and then, heading into next year.
All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back live tomorrow, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, right back here on GDT Live.
Robbie
You
Shrimp.
have to remind me. With Rob Shrimp. Okay. Well, there we go. All right, Colton. For everyone else, thank you, and we'll see you back here tomorrow on GDT Live.